So I like to say I'm the stubborn, cheap Irishman I swore I'd never grow up to be. You know, my dad was a very frugal guy, and I think I have a lot of his characteristics. He had an auto repair facility, which I worked in as a kid. So that's where I got my mechanical background and my ability to think through how something is done, because that's what car mechanics is all about, finding the problem and fixing it. Guitars are, there's a lot to setting them up in order to make them play well, in order to make them sound good, and all the different things. So I dove right into the, the science behind how it works, and and it's still a tough thing to do. You do a little bit of research, you find out kind of the general direction where you want to go, like setting the intonation on how the neck's laid out, and what's finding the sound and things like that. It's all just kind of a game. It's a puzzle, and which is, like I said, growing up in the shop, that's what I learned how to do. Here's the problem. How am I going to fix it? Find it, fix it. I've played guitar since I was about 8 years old. When I was growing up, the music of my choice was Southern rock and Led Zeppelin. I've just loved it. I played constantly since then. My degree is in landscape architecture, but for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been a computer guy. I'm a software consultant. So moving electrons around all day just doesn't do it for me. Sometimes I'll say, I need to go clean the chicken coop or something. Just something where I can see the result. And I think a lot of that again comes from my experience as a kid in the shop. Touching things is very important. Mechanics are very different from electronics, obviously. Same problem-solving skill, but when you can't, I love that touch and feel, which is what the guitar making does for me. It's a creative outlet. So having a design background as a landscape architect and having the art history and things like that, I definitely have a creative side, but also that mechanical side. And I think it's the sort of intersection of those two things that I find so intriguing about building guitars. I do a lot of specialty wood building, and I thought a guitar project would be a fun thing to take on. When I first started, I had an idea of certain styles of guitars, configurations of the various components like pickups and things for a certain sound that I was looking for that I didn't already have a guitar for. I started by making copies of the old standards like the Fender Stratocaster or the Telecaster and things like that, because I was looking for that sound. And then after doing that, I morphed into building my own bodies and things like that to be a little bit more creative and to just kind of invent different styles and looks and things like that. So I'll typically start with my designs, which I'll start laying things out, thinking about it, looking at other examples, and then I'll move into the build phase where I'll build typically the body. Again, at this point I haven't built any necks. I'll typically buy a stock neck. So I'll get the parts, start to acquire the parts, thinking about what I want for all the different components, the pickups and the knobs and switches and covers, plates and all that stuff. So I'll work on acquiring those parts, and then I'll just start the assembly process. The finishing tends to be the most time consuming, and also again, you have to wait for good weather to do finishing because it has to be done outside. The finishing, I use what's called a lacquer that's called a nitrocellulose lacquer. So the lacquer is a highly volatile compound, and it really needs decent, warm, dry weather in order to do it if you don't have a controlled environment, which I don't. So I have to wait for the right weather, and when I have the time during the right weather in order to do that. So one guitar, sort of most proud of was I started with the idea that I wanted to build a resonator guitar. A resonator is basically an aluminum cone that's inside the guitar that helps to produce the sort of metallic bluesy sound that comes out of that. I wanted to build an acoustic resonator. That was the primary idea. So I wanted to build an electric resonator. And so I went out, did my homework again, started to look at a bunch of different ideas for how that might look. And so I decided on a body style. I'm a big fan of Art Deco, so I kind of wanted it to look an Art Deco sort of style of thing. And then I started obsessing about the cover plate design. So I was looking at the existing cover plates for things that I could get out there as stock parts and decided that I wanted to build my own. I always want to do something myself. I'll try to do something myself before I pay somebody to do it, which doesn't always wind up great. So I did the design for it and then had to figure out how I was actually going to produce it. Managed to find a person locally who can do water jet cutting, so I was actually able to do a CAD design in the CAD and have that automated cutting practice done at a local machine shop. So it kind of evolved over the whole process, right? I started with an idea, and then as I got into it, different components of it, sort of fell into place, and the overall thing kind of came together at the end. It takes a long time to do them. What I'll typically do is start, obviously, with the body construction. I also live here in the Northeast, so working in the winter means that anything that has to be done outdoors tends to be delayed until warmer weather. I don't have an indoor shop at this point. But so the overall process does take a long time, purely for the pleasure of doing it and making my own instruments. Obviously the playing of music requires all kinds of things, and so I kind of laugh at myself, the fact that I'm a junk collector, and so I found several prize acquisitions at the dump, including a Hammond rotary speaker that I grabbed from the dump and restored, and I'm using that for my equipment. Most recently, I just found an old 1950s, 60s amplifier that was sitting in a snowbank next to the metal pile at the dump, and I'm also restoring that. And as I do this, another part of this creative endeavor is learning. I'm fooling around with electronics in rebuilding this amplifier and learning about that. So it's really just like it's a creative endeavor, like I said, and a learning experience about all these different things. It's a really wonderful hobby. It never occurs to me that I can't, especially now that we have YouTube. I keep going back to, being a kid where we did so many things. You just get a crazy harebrained idea and you'd go try to make it happen. A lot of things failed, no big deal. Sometimes things didn't work, but I'm just stubborn enough to get a bug in my head and think that, I'm going to do this. And, if I can't wind up doing that, I'll go down a different path, or I'll find a different way to do that. You be the person that you want your kids to be, and kids do frustratingly.